Hey, dear friends, um, today we're going to start a new Dhamma program. And in this program, we're going to talk about many important things that Buddha. So before moving on, I will introduce myself. My name is Bante Mahinda Vijaya. I've been following Buddhism for more than 15 years. So I've been deeply following Buddhism, and I've been in this monk life for more than 7 years. And I want to share with you my experience and things I learned in the Pali Canon. The Pali Canon is the set of books where we find all the teachings of the Buddha, and it was preserved for more than 2,500 years. There are many important things that we can learn that will help us to gain enlightenment, to understand life better, and find or build a peaceful life. So what I'm going to do today is I selected a certain part of the Pali Canon that is called the Dhammapada. Dhammapada is a book in the Sutta Pitaka. And it has a certain section called Citta Vagga, or the section of the mind. So it has 11 verses uttered by the Buddha, and those verses explain the nature of the mind. So I'm going to take these 11 verses to talk about the mind. It's very important to learn these things if we want to develop our minds. So, friends, do you know that Buddha's core teaching is called the Four Noble Truths? So there are four truths that Buddha taught us. There are the noble truth of suffering, noble truth of cause of suffering, noble truth of cessation of suffering, and noble truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. So, in one sutta, the Buddha said that gave a simile. He said, if you take the footprint of an elephant or a tusker, that footprint is the biggest, largest footprint in the world. So, whatever footprints there are in this world of other animals, all these footprints can be put inside the footprint of an elephant. Just like that, whatever wholesome qualities there are, all the wholesome qualities, all the wholesome or good qualities that one can develop can be put inside the realization of the Four Noble Truths. So these wholesome qualities cannot exceed the realization of Four Noble Truths because it is completely made of wholesome qualities, that realization. So if somebody can realize the Four Noble truths, that person will be able to purify his or her mind from all the defilements. So these Four Noble Truths are the Noble Truths of suffering, Noble Truths of cause of suffering, Noble Truths of the cessation of suffering, and Noble Truths of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. So we are going to learn today is, as I told you, the section of Citta Vagga from the Dhammapada. So if you take that simile, all the wholesome qualities there are in the world can be put inside the realization of Four Noble Truths. So all the teachings of the Buddha, so Buddha points out the wholesome things that we can develop to develop our mind, to purify our minds. So all the teachings, we can see the Four Noble Truths. So this is kind of an exercise. So let's go one by one and see if we can see the Four Noble Truths in these verses. So we'll take the first verse. So there are 11 verses, and all of them talk about the mind. So the first verse is, mind quivers and shakes, hard to guard, hard to restrain. The wise straightens it out like a fletcher straightens an arrow. Fletcher is the one who makes arrows. And they said the mind, the mind which is not developed, quivers and shakes because of the defilements, because of greed, hatred, and delusion. So it is hard to guard, hard to restrain. So what does that create? When somebody's mind quivers and shakes because of craving, because of hatred, greed, and delusion, it creates suffering. So that is the noble truth of suffering. And why does it quiver? Because of craving and defilements. That is the cause of suffering. Okay? So it is hard to guard and hard to restrain. So even if we want to guard our minds, even if we try to restrain our mind from suffering and things that cause suffering, it is very hard. It's nearly impossible for most of the beings. So that itself is suffering. And that means that the beings are so attached to defilements, craving, greed, hatred, delusion, all the defilements. So that explains the cause of suffering. The wise straightens it out. The wise, the person with wisdom. Wisdom is a wholesome quality that we have to develop. That is the path. That is a path should be developed in order to eradicate and abandon the cause of suffering and escape from the noble truth of suffering. So wisdom is the path. Just like a fletcher would straighten an arrow, a wise person would straighten his or her mind uh, to make the mind so that it does not quiver or shake because of defilements. So defilements make the cause of suffering, and the quivering and shaking mind is suffering, noble to the suffering, and wisdom is the path. If one guards and restrain the mind and come to the state where the mind does not quiver anymore, that is the noble truth of cessation of suffering, the ultimate bliss or ultimate peace. So we can see the Four Noble Truths in this verse. So let's go to the next verse. Like a fish pulled from the sea and cast upon the shore, the mind flounders about. The martyr's sway should be thrown off. So there's a simile. Buddha takes a fish pulled from the sea and cast upon the shore. So mind is just like that. When a fish is pulled from the sea and cast upon the shore, that fish would flounder and quiver and shake about. And mind is like that. When it faces defilement, so when mind experiences greed or lust or hatred or jealousy, okay, it's like a fish taken out from the sea and put on the earth. So that is suffering. Such a fish would suffer. So just like that, a shaking mind, a mind that flounders, will experience suffering. That is the noble to the suffering. So that happens because of craving. That is the cause of suffering. And Buddha said the martyr's sway or martyr's rule or power should be thrown off. So the beings are caught in martyr's control. So martyr represents defilements. Martyr represents sensual desires, sensual pleasures. And beings are caught in that. They cannot escape as they wish. So they have so much attachments to the sensual pleasures. And they experience greed, hatred, and delusion and suffer. So that is the bond. That is an attachment. The beings are caught in the power of Mara, power of sensual pleasures. So that bond is the cause of suffering. And the beings will have experienced suffering that is the noble to the suffering, just like a fish taken off from the sea. Uh, so Buddha said the Mara's rule should be thrown off. So in order to throw off Mara's rule or Mara's sway, that person will have to develop the path leading to Nibbana. So that path is the noble truth of path leading to the cessation of suffering, noble eightfold path. And when Mara's sway is thrown off, that person will experience ultimate happiness, ultimate bliss. That is Nibbana, or the third noble truth, the noble truth of cessation of suffering. The next verse, Buddha said, the mind is hard to hold back, it is flightly, and landing wherever it wishes. The mind wishes to be or dwell in sensual pleasures. So it's very hard to hold back, it is flightly. Buddha said, it is good to tame the mind. A tamed mind leads to bliss. So mind lands wherever it wishes. Mind wishes to experience sensual happiness and be indulged in sensual happiness, which will give rise to lust and craving. As a result, craving would bring suffering because that person will be attached to something impermanent. When that becomes impermanent, he will experience suffering. Even though beings would like to purify their minds from greed or hatred and delusion, it is not easy. So it is very hard to hold back. It is very hard to realize the nature of the mind. So that itself is suffering. That difficulty is suffering. And mind lands wherever it wishes. So it wishes to be or get indulged in sensual pleasures. That is craving, the second noble truth. So it is good to tame the mind. So taming the mind is the path. That is the noble eightfold path. A tamed mind leads to bliss. Bliss is happiness, ultimate happiness, or Nibbana, the cessation of suffering. So you see, in all the verses, we can see the Four Noble Truths, because as I said in the beginning of this lesson, the Buddha's simile of the footprint of an elephant. All the footprints can be put inside the footprint of an elephant. Just like that, all the wholesome qualities that Buddha tries to explain us fall into the realization of Four Noble Truths. The Buddha said, the mind is so hard to see, so subtle, landing wherever it wishes. The wise protect the mind. A guarded mind leads to bliss. So wisdom and guarding the mind makes the path. One has to develop wisdom in order to escape from suffering. So wisdom is the path. So it leads to bliss or Nibbana, that is the cessation of suffering. So it is very difficult to see the mind. It's so subtle, it's not easy to control. Even though beings suffer, they cannot escape from the mind. So that difficulty that the beings experience is suffering. And the mind lands wherever it wishes. Mind wishes to be with sensual pleasures or craving. So that is the cause of suffering. So you see the Four Noble Truths in those verses. Next verse is, the mind travels far, wandering alone. With no body, it hides in a cave. Those who will restrain the mind are freed from Mara's bonds. So the mind travels far, wandering alone. So it is not easy to catch the mind. It doesn't have a body. It hides in a cave. So cave is the physical body. The mind doesn't have a physical body. It is formless. So it travels far and wanders alone. It is very hard to see. It's very hard to catch and control because it doesn't have a body. So if it had a body, we'd be able to get hold of it, but it doesn't have a body. But it hides in a cave. The cave is the physical body we have. So mind uh, hides in the body, a physical body. So Buddha said, those who will restrain the mind are freed from Mara's bonds. So Mara's bonds are the attachments we have for sensual pleasures. So these bonds make the cause of suffering or craving, the second noble truth. So the suffering that beings experience because of the mind, because the mind travels far, it wanders alone, it doesn't have a body, it hides in the cave, that means the physical body, and it's very difficult to restrain the mind, even though it brings suffering. So there is noble truth of suffering and the cause of suffering. Those who restrain the mind are freed from Mara's bonds. So freedom is the third noble truth. Freedom from suffering, freedom from all defilements. That is the cessation of suffering. Restraining the mind and escaping from the Mara's bonds. So restraining the mind is the thing that we have to practice. That is the path. So that explains the noble truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering, the fourth noble truth. So in all the verses, we can talk about we can see the four noble truths. We can talk about four noble truths. Those of unsteady mind who don't understand the true teaching and whose confidence wavers do not protect their wisdom. So mind is not steady for those who don't understand the true teaching, those who haven't comprehended the Four Noble Truths as per the teachings of the Buddha. So an unsteady mind brings suffering because the mind is not steady. That mind will experience all the defilements: hatred, greed, delusion, jealousy, covetousness, conceit, pride, all these unwholesome qualities. This mind will have to experience, and that will cause suffering. So there is the noble truth of suffering and the cause of suffering, the first and second noble truths. So those who don't understand the true teaching, so that the lack of understanding is delusion. That is also the cause of suffering, the second noble truth. And whose confidence wavers, so he doesn't have confidence in the path. So confidence in the path is a part of the path that we have to practice. So for those who don't have confidence and those confidence wavers, that happens because of defilements. That is the cause of suffering, the second noble truth. And the path is the fourth noble truth. They do not perfect their wisdom. So their wisdom is not perfect. So wisdom is a part of the path, the fourth noble truth. And if somebody is able to perfect their wisdom, they'll be free from suffering. That freedom is the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering. Okay? If we go to the next verse, one whose mind is uncorrupted, whose heart is undamaged, who is given up right and wrong, alert, has nothing to fear. So, this verse, Buddha tries to explains one whose mind is uncorrupted. So, mind is corrupted with defilements. So, that corruption brings suffering. That is the first noble truth, the noble truth of suffering. Corrupted mind is a part of suffering. And that corruption happens because of craving and all the defilements. That makes the cause of suffering. So whose heart is undamaged. So if somebody's heart or somebody's mind, so here heart means the mind. So if somebody's mind is damaged with defilements, that brings suffering, the first noble truth. So it is damaged with defilements, that is the second noble truth. But if someone's mind is uncorrupted and if someone's mind is undamaged, he has experienced, he has practiced the path, and he has escaped from suffering. That so in this verse, Buddha talks about an arahant, one who has escaped from suffering. So that arahant has achieved cessation of suffering. That is the third noble truth, because his mind is uncorrupted and his heart is undamaged. That is the third noble truth, the noble truth of cessation of suffering. And he's alert and he has nothing to fear. So, being alert of the nature of the mind is the path. And he has nothing to fear. So, fear is suffering. So, those who haven't practiced the path will have to experience fear. But an arahant has nothing to fear. He has nothing to be afraid of. So fear is suffering. And the things, the defilements that create suffering is the cause of suffering, the second noble truth. Escape from suffering is the third noble truth. The path is the fourth noble truth. So in this verse as well, we can see the Four Noble Truths. So if you go to the next one, knowing this body breaks like a pot, fortifying the mind like a city. Attack Mara with the sword of wisdom, guard your conquest and never settle. This means Buddha said that we had to understand that this body, this physical body, is like a pot. It'll break up in no time. So we don't have much time left in this to live this life. We'll have to experience death, old age, and death. So the realization of that this body is like a pot and it breaks up. That realization is called the right view. Right view is the path, right? He said the mind should be protected like a king would protect a city, fortifying the mind. So at the time of the Buddha, the kings would protect their cities by building a fort. And he said that the mind should be protected like that. Because if someone does not understand that this physical body is impermanent and it breaks up, it's like a pot. Those people will not try to understand the Four Noble Truths and practice the path and purify their minds. They will be engaged in sensual pleasures. They will get indulged in sensual pleasures. So the understanding that this body is impermanent is very important, and that will help the disciples of the Buddha to protect the mind, just like a king would protect his city by building a fort. So Buddha said the mind should be protected. City. So attack Mara with the sword of wisdom. So Mara represents sensual pleasures and the attachments, defilements. So these defilements should be destroyed with wisdom, with the sword of wisdom. So defilements make up the second noble truth, the cause of suffering. And the nature of the body, the impermanent nature creates suffering. That is the first noble truth. The body breaks up like a pot. That is the first noble truth. The suffering. And protecting the mind is the path. That is the fourth noble truth. The path leading to the cessation of suffering. And attacking the Mara with the sword of wisdom is the path. Attacking the defilements, attacking the bonds with the sword of wisdom is the path. So Buddha said, guard your conquest and never settle. So when a disciple of the Buddha practices the path little by little, he will gain control of the mind, and that conquest should be guarded. He should not let the defilements take him over again and put him back to to this existence, the cycle of rebirth. So Buddha said, you have to guard your conquest. You have to fight with Mara with the sword of wisdom and guard your conquest and never settle until you attain the ultimate bliss, the complete freedom from suffering. So the complete freedom or liberation from suffering is the third noble truth, and the path is the noble eightfold path. That is the fourth noble truth. So let's take these three verses together. So Buddha said, all too soon this body will lie upon the earth, lacking consciousness, tossed aside like a useless log. So there is the nature of the body, the physical body. So this talks about suffering, the noble truth of suffering. So all too soon this body will lie upon the earth, lacking consciousness. The consciousness would leave the body. And when that happens, this body will rot. And it will be tossed aside like a useless log. So this is the nature of the body, the nature of life. So we had to understand that. So this talks about the noble truth of suffering. And realization is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. And why this suffering causes? Because of craving. So we have attachments to this world, and when the world becomes impermanent, we experience suffering. If that craving is eradicated, that brings the noble truth of cessation of suffering. A directed mind would do you more harm than a hater to the hated or an enemy to the foe. So if the mind is wrongly directed, that'll give rise to many defilements, cravings, and hatred, and greed and delusion, all these unwholesome qualities. So all these unwholesome qualities will come about because of a wrongly directed mind. So that wrong direction is the cause of suffering. That is also delusion. Cause of suffering. It'll do you more harm. That harm is suffering. So harm represents suffering. Because when we do bad or unwholesome bodily and verbal and mental actions, that will bring us suffering in the future. So that happens because of a wrongly directed mind. It will do more harm. So that harm represents suffering. So wrong direction is the cause of suffering. So it will do more harm than a hater to the hated or an enemy to their foe. So that is the harm that the wrongly directed mind would give, would do. So that is the noble truth of suffering. The rightly directed mind. So the right direction is the path leading to nibbana, path leading to true liberation. That is the right direction. So a rightly directed mind would do you more good. So that good is nibbana. Good is ultimate happiness, liberation. It will do you more good than your mother or father or any other relative. So you see, in these verses, we can see the noble truth of suffering, noble truth of the cause of suffering, noble truth of cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. So developing the mind means eradicating defilements, eradicating craving, eradicating unwholesome qualities. And we have to identify what is suffering in order to do that, and how suffering is created, how suffering is made because of craving and all the defilements. So that is a part of mind development in Buddhism. And if that can be done, that person will be able to achieve happiness, true happiness. That is the noble truth of cessation of suffering. That is the third noble truth, or nibbana, complete purification of the mind. So in order to do that, we have to practice the path leading to the cessation of suffering. That is the Noble Eightfold Path. And it starts with right view. Right view means the understanding of the Four Noble Truths. So these verses give us so much meaning, so that when you learn these verses, we'll be able to understand the Four Noble Truths, which will help us to develop right view, and that will help us to develop the path leading to the cessation of suffering. So dear friends, let's move on to the next section, that is the meditation. So Buddha explained the world in a different perspective than the perspective of the noble beings in the world. Buddha explained in the world as two sides. So it has two sides. There's an internal side of the world and an external side of the world. So the internal side of the world, Buddha explained it as 6 faculties. They are the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. These are the 6 faculties. And there are 6 external faculties called forms, sounds, odors, tastes, touch, and thoughts. So forms can only be seen with the eye. So the domain of the eye is forms, is made of forms. Eye cannot hear sounds. Eye cannot smell odors or taste or touch. Eye can only see, right? So the domain of the eye is made of forms, and the domain of the ear is made of sounds. So sounds are the domain of the ear. Ear cannot see, ear can only hear. And the nose, the domain of the nose is called odors or smells. The domain of the tongue is called tastes. Domain of the body is touch. So with the body we cannot see. We have to have the eye in order to see forms. So these first 5 faculties are mutually exclusive. The domain of the eye is form or forms. Domain of the ear is made of sounds, and domain of the nose is made of odors or smells. Domain of the tongue is made of tastes. Domain of the body is made of touch. So these first 5 external faculties are mutually exclusive. But the mind, the 6th internal faculty, mind, is connected with the first 5 internal faculties. Mind is connected with the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. Because everything we see with our eye, we can think about it. We can bring that into our mind as an image, a mental image. So all these 5 internal faculties are connected with the 6th faculty. And when the ear, or let's take the eye, when we see something with our eye, we get that image in our mind as a mental image. That becomes a thought. So in this explanation, Buddha described thoughts as something external. See, all the thoughts are external. So the internal faculties are eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. External faculties are forms, sounds, odors, tastes, touch, and thoughts. So there are another 6 things that we have to understand. The consciousness. There are 6 types of consciousness. Consciousness is consciousness. We sense the world, right? We sense we can see things with our eyes. We can hear sounds with our ears. Like that, we can see, hear, and sense because of consciousness. So with the eye, there has to be eye consciousness in order to see forms. Example, when we are sleeping, we have the eyes, and there are forms, but we cannot see. And when we are sleeping, we cannot hear sounds because even though there is the ear, There are sounds, but there isn't the ear consciousness. Ear consciousness hasn't appeared there. That's why we cannot hear. So, in order to sense the world, there has to be these six types of consciousness. To see forms, there has to be eye consciousness. To hear sounds, there has to be ear consciousness. To smell odors, there has to be nose consciousness. To taste, to taste with our tongue, there has to be tongue consciousness. And to touch or to sense touch, there has to be body consciousness. And to identify thoughts, there has to be mind consciousness. So these are the six types of consciousness. And the combination of the eye forms and eye consciousness is called eye contact. Okay? The combination of the ear, sounds, and ear consciousness is called ear contact. The combination of nose, odors, and nose consciousness is called nose contact. The combination of tongue, tastes, and tongue consciousness is called tongue contact. The combination of body, touch, and body consciousness is called body contact. The combination of the mind, thoughts, and mind consciousness is called mind contact. So there are six types of contact. So without contact, we cannot experience the world. We cannot experience its existence. Okay, that experience is there because of contact. Buddha said that there are there are mental phenomena that are born of contact. With contact, feelings come to exist. Like when we see forms with our eye, and there is the eye consciousness, and the combination of the eye forms and eye consciousness is called eye contact. And because of eye contact, feelings arise. Pleasant feelings and unpleasant feelings and neutral feelings arise. And perceptions arise. The perception of seeing things as beautiful or ugly or valuable or invaluable, or seeing the world as me, mine, and myself, or seeing the world as impermanent. These are perceptions. So these perceptions occur, they come to be because of contact. And volitions are these mental formations that'll that'll give force to do actions. Like we would do actions with our body, speech, and mind because of volitions. If that mental formation is not there, if those mental formations are not there, we will not be able to do actions with our body. We will not be able to talk. We will not be able to think thoughts. So these, in order to do that, there has to be volitions, and those volitions or mental formations are made of contact. So you see, all these things that arise in our lives are results of causes. They are dependently originated. So this is what we have to understand. So let's try to do a small meditation. This is type of an insight meditation where we try to understand the internal faculties and external faculties and how they interact, and how defilements arise in us. So we had to understand this in order to realize the Four Noble Truths. So when I say, I will chant the meditation, and you try to reflect with your mind. So if you are able to sit down in a comfortable seat, you'll be able to do this meditation. Okay, I will chant. I is impermanent. This I is made out of a cause. It is impermanent. Forms are impermanent. Forms are impermanent. Consciousness is impermanent. I consciousness is impermanent. Combination of I forms and I consciousness, that is called eye contact. Eye contact is also impermanent. All the feelings, perceptions, and volitions made contact are impermanent. Is impermanent. Sounds are impermanent. Sounds are impermanent. Sounds are impermanent. Consciousness is impermanent. Ear consciousness is impermanent. Combination of the ear, sound, ear consciousness is called ear contact. Ear contact is also impermanent. Ear contact is impermanent. Phenomena made of ear contact. They are feelings, perceptions, and volitions. All of them is impermanent. Nose is impermanent. Odors are impermanent. Consciousness is impermanent. Consciousness is impermanent. Combination of the nose, odors, and nose consciousness is called nose contact. Nose contact is also impermanent. Contact is impermanent. Phenomena born of perceptions and volitions are impermanent. Phenomena are impermanent. Tongue is impermanent. Tongue is impermanent. Is impermanent. Tastes are impermanent. Consciousness is impermanent. Consciousness is impermanent, impermanent. Combination of the tongue, tastes, and tongue consciousness is called tongue contact. Tongue contact is also impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. Tongue contact is also impermanent, impermanent. All the mental phenomena born of tongue contact, perceptions and volitions are impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. Body is impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. Body is impermanent, impermanent. Touch is impermanent, impermanent. Touch is impermanent, impermanent. Body consciousness is impermanent, impermanent. Body consciousness is impermanent. Combination of the body, touch, and body consciousness is called body contact. Body contact is also impermanent, impermanent. Body contact is also impermanent, impermanent. Phenomena, born of contact, feelings, perceptions, and mental formations, volitions are mind is permanent, impermanent, impermanent. Mind is impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. Thoughts are impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. Thoughts are impermanent, impermanent. Consciousness is impermanent, impermanent. Inconsciousness is impermanent, impermanent. Combination of the mind, thoughts, and mind consciousness is called mind contact. Mind contact is also impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. Consciousness, mind contact is also impermanent, impermanent, impermanent. So phenomena born of mind contact, feelings, perceptions, and volitions are impermanent, impermanent. Phenomena are impermanent, everything is impermanent. Six internal faculties, all the six external faculties, all the six types of consciousness, all the six types of contact, all the phenomena born of six types of contact. Everything is impermanent, impermanent. Attachment for these impermanent things brings suffering. Therefore, what is impermanent will bring suffering. What is impermanent is and suffering are not self. Permanent is suffering. What is impermanent and suffering is not me, not mine. So meditation, this insight meditation on impermanent, Four Noble Truths, and escape from suffering. Sadhu, sadhu. Okay, dear friends, I think it's time to wind up. So today we talked about the mind. We talked about some verses. We took some verses from the Dhammapada, from the Citta Vagga, the section about the mind, and we talked about these verses, and we try to identify the Four Noble Truths explained in those verses, and we try to understand how important it is to understand the Four Noble Truths, realize the Four Noble Truths, in order to develop our mind and purify our mind. So just like a goldsmith would take flakes of gold and purify the gold from all the dirt, Buddha said that we can purify our minds from the dirt, from defilements. But if we think the defilements are a part of our mind, we will not be able to purify our mind, because we think greed is a part of us. We think hatred is a part of us. We think delusion is a part of us. But Buddha said these are external defilements which can be abandoned. And just like a goldsmith would abandon the dirt and purify the gold and would make jewelry out of that gold, Buddha said we can purify our minds from these defilements, and that will bring us true peace, true happiness. So I think today's lesson might have given you something to think about, and this will definitely help us to realize the real nature of our lives and escape from suffering. So, dear friends, I think we should wind up now. And next week also, I'm planning to teach you something very important. So make sure you join our program next week as well. So until then, I'll wish you all the best and good luck. And before I forget, I want to wish you all a very happy New Year, and may all of you be able to find happiness in the coming New Year, and have time to practice good qualities, wholesome qualities, and that will help all of you to escape from suffering and find peace and find true happiness. Okay, until we meet again, all the best and good luck. Thank you for joining. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.